Hey, Rob.
How are you?
I'm doing well. So was that easier to get in than last time?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Right. The right numbers in the right order. It does an amazing
Good, good.
job.
Okay. Well, yeah, we learned something. I don't know what the actual problem was, but Pam had made a recurring meeting that rather than one for a given date, and somehow that made everything misbehave. I don't know.
Mm. There's,
So
there's a tendency to use a template too when you're
yeah, what she'll
publishing
typically
it. You
do
know,
is she'll copy the last meeting,
yeah.
kind of paste it, and that I think has worked better. Hello. All right, we're getting somewhere. All right, Chris.
Hello.
So I think we got a little better on the technical side this time.
Oh, good. Yay.
Doesn't seem like anybody's having trouble.
Okay. My lights are bright. Red light. Ernie, I think, is going to just give Ernie a minute. He'll be here.
Okay. Yeah. So recording's on. We're all set. There's Ernie.
There he goes. Now I turn the lights out. This is really gorgeous. Okay.
Hey, Ernie.
There he
All right.
is. Hello, Ernie. Is he frozen or is that my computer?
He's not frozen to me.
Ooh,
Can you hear us?
I can hear you perfectly. I can see everybody.
Oh.
Well, I can seven squares.
All right. Are people frozen to you, Chris?
Yeah, that's what I went. What did we do last time? I stopped my video
You
and that
can
gave
turn
me.
off your video if that works to let you see people, then it's
I do. I just Ernie's still frozen.
No, I'm not.
I were just just being still. You gotta move. Right. All right. Well, let's try this for a minute. I think
all right. Yeah,
people
we can.
are moving. I see motion. That's good. Good sign.
All right.
All right. So we
You have your contacts
started
in?
the meeting. My contacts. No, my glasses. No contacts. So we're starting our meeting tonight, and I just will make a motion to approve the agenda as is. Everybody good?
Yeah, I would make such a motion. Approve the agenda as
Second.
written. That's it.
All in favor? Yes, aye.
Aye.
All right.
And then public correspondence, I think Pam, we had the two things that I got from T-Rock. And then because last week she added the other 4 correspondence, but I didn't get them, so I don't know. No.
We should just
We'd
ask
seen them
Chris,
in the planning commission packet, so
just point of order, Chris, in the agenda, public comments come next.
Oh, sorry.
I don't
have the
know
agenda in front
if
of me.
anybody's got something not on the agenda, but
Oh,
we should.
sorry about that. Public comments?
Not counting, not on the agenda? Okay. Just wanted to check.
All right.
Thank you.
No, good call. Okay, so going back to correspondence,
Yeah.
I think we just accept correspondence as is.
Yeah,
Any
I saw
comments on-
just to summarize what's in the packet, there are 4 letters around solar sighting, basically positive for PV and trying to limit the constraints on PV. Shepherd, Andrews, Manganello, and Ornstein.
Yep,
And then the introduction of the new regional energy coordinator.
okay. Yeah, because we had all seen those in the plan commission packet as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're done with the correspondence, I think we really only have one thing on the agenda. And it's sort of a combination, because I thought we might want to just talk about the enhanced energy plan. And then sort of segue into preferred site, but I can't, yeah, and quite frankly, I'm a little confused. Since last we spoke with the solar siting committee, it was my understanding that you were going to talk to T-Rock. And I think you only told
Right.
us during the planning commission meeting, not during this meeting,
Correct.
What-
Yeah.
what they did. So I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, and it wasn't in the correspondence, so maybe just an update on that, because we did, if you look at the minutes from the last meeting of this group,
Yeah.
we are doing something different than what was planned. So I can give a little background. So I did talk to Peter Gregory and to Kyle relative to the plan, which was, hey, we're going to do an enhanced energy plan. It's a big project. Let's have a public kickoff meeting, and I'll put something on the listserv, and we'll get somebody from T-Rock to come and be a resource to answer all the questions. And that was the plan. When I talked to them, first of all, Peter Gregory said, when in doubt, Kyle is our resource. So fine, that's good. He knows Norwich. And second, what they said was, the enhanced energy plan changes, the changes needed to our current plan to make it an enhanced energy plan are relatively minor, and are specifically listed in that memo that Kyle wrote that was in the planning commission minutes, or a planning commission packet a couple of meetings ago. And it's 3 pages, of which maybe half a page is, these are the relatively minor changes you need to make to be enhanced energy plan qualified. So that's one thing, that sort of rewriting the plan was minor. The second piece was that there is new data, energy usage data. And I saw, Chris, you put in the packet the current energy use data, right? That's an appendix to our current town plan. And so that data is coming updated from the state within the next couple of months. And so that would be pasted in the back of any, or embedded in an enhanced energy plan when we redid it. And so those 2 things were really straightforward and really weren't worth making a big public hoopla about. And so the whole topic really came down to one issue, which is, I think, the one we just need to address first, because it's the one substantive issue, and that is the default preferred siting statement in the current town plan. And so I think we need to have the conversation, and we need to make a concrete decision that says, are we proposing to change that? And then there are various alternative ways of crafting your preferred siting criteria in the plans, and Sharon has one. That's why we put the Sharon one in to the packet. And as we've said before, we're the only town in the state that has default solar for the whole town area. So there are plenty of other examples of enhanced energy plans with preferred siting criteria. But I thought that really is what it boils down to, is that this subcommittee and in this first conversation, we should just clarify where we stand on that one issue. And then we should be able to move forward pretty quickly. So that's why we changed plans from what was in the minutes.
Okay. Ernie, give us your comments on that.
Well, I don't really have anything to say at this point. Everything that Jan said is what I remember from the last meeting.
So do we, if we just open up the conversation, do we agree with removing the default preferred siting in the town plan when we rewrite it? What is the feeling of this committee?
I think that we should.
Yes, I agree. I think we should. It's not getting rid of solar. It is just not the blanket default preferred status.
Arnie, do you agree?
Yes, yes, I agree.
Okay.
I mean, my understanding is in in terms of it being just the blanket sort of default status, it doesn't prevent solar because it's the same basic. It doesn't prevent any kind of it doesn't prevent the development of solar power in the town. It just might simply do the same sort of thing that preventing a house on a ridgeline does, or something like that. Things that are you just don't want to do because it's bad practice, or it violates, issues or interests such as scenic areas and so on and so forth. Yes, you first.
No, I just think that's a great way of saying it, Ernie. You're not stopping development. You're not stopping any of this. You're directing it in areas that are appropriate. And that's what a lot of towns are doing right now, is putting an inventory of areas, scenic areas that they want to make sure that are conserved, and be more specific, as the PUC has recommended that we be more specific about areas that should be protected. And the Sharontown plan was great. I thought they did a fabulous job with how they identified those areas.
Yeah, I was impressed. I read the plans from, all the way around Thetford, Stratford, Fairleigh, Sharon. There's a lot of really good material that we can work with there. There are a lot of good ways of writing it up.
I think some people are afraid. I think the default, the way it was before, or the way it is currently until it's changed, happened because I think people sort of envision that it's going to take a lot more space to generate enough electricity than it really does. I mean, to take care of the needs of the town's the municipal aspect of the town. If you look at, I think it was Sharon's diagram, it's minuscule compared to the area of the town, and even of the areas that you could put it. It's just a small fraction. And I think that if you start then sort of multiply it a bit by the number of families, if you wanted to, for some reason, say, have enough solar that the town becomes self-sufficient, which I don't know if that's a goal or reasonable or anything like that, it's still a fairly small section of the land, and that, a lot of the people can house the solar panels on their own property, enough solar panels on their own property to generate what they need for themselves. So
Go ahead,
don't think-
Linda. Oh, sorry, Ernie.
so I'm just thinking that that's why there was sort of at the time, a sort of a fear that if we didn't say everything was viable, then we'd run out of space, but that's not the case. I mean, careful calculations show that it's considerably less space needed in the town.
Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you very much. So I just like to say, if you want to make a change, so right now, as I read the town plan, it is saying default, but noting that Norwich has an existing ridgeline protection overlay area, a shoreline protection overlay area, and the historic village district as areas in which, not that solar couldn't be developed, but it would have to be reviewed very carefully. And so I would just pose to you, what additional restrictions do you have in mind? You have to start to get specific to say, how do we want to phrase this? And I'd also like to just correct Ernie's thing that all along from back in 2017, we've identified, like, every town has a similar kind of diagram, as you noted in Sharon's town plan, that the amount of land needed to be devoted to renewable energy generation is not small compared to a total. So that has been known. It's not like that was misunderstood. Thank you.
And just so that everybody's given their opinion on of the three of us, I wanted to make clear that I agree with the statement that we should take the default off. I mean, to me, it's a consistency point. If one of the main reasons we're doing an enhanced energy plan is to get that influence, that substantial deference piece of the town's wishes involved in solar siting, so we're doing it to give the town influence, then why would we come out of the gate having tied one hand behind our back by saying the whole town's default? So I think we should do the task to specify what in more detail than the blanket default. But clearly we're not talking about prohibiting solar. That's illegal. The state regs don't let you prohibit solar at a municipal level. So you can guide it, you can influence it, but you can't prohibit it. You can't even do anything that effectively looks like it's prohibiting it. So it's now a question of influencing it. And just one
Influencing
point, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the one point I know is looking at these other town plans is both Sharon, Thetford, and Stratford all have single big projects in the megawatt, several megawatt range. So Sharon has a 2-point-something megawatt PV project and I don't know where it is in Sharon, but it's in the Sharon Industrial Park or something. And then the Copper Mines project, which is 7-point-something, is split in terms of credit, Stratford and Thetford. So Sharon is like 2/3 of the way to their goal because they're a smaller town than we are, and they have this great big project there. So if you look at Norwich and say, we're not going to fit a megawatt or bigger project anywhere in Norwich, then we do have a different task ahead of us than, Stratford and Thetford that already have 3.5 megawatts. So that's like 7 Norwich solar upper Loveland projects already installed in either Thetford or Stratford. It's something.
We have the biggest one we have is down on Route 5. So, I mean, I know it doesn't compare to that, but
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, and
Yeah.
again, I actually would like some clarity on these things that, and I'm sorry, I sound like an ignoramus, but I'm going to ask this question. When towns are getting, how do I phrase this? the solar credits that are generated from any solar facility, if the credits were sold out of state, does the town still get the credit for it? So if Thetford and
Against on their
Sharon's,
state goal, you mean?
yeah, so if Norwich's state goal, our state goal is, you know, a million, let's just call it 1,000,000 megawatts, right? But it
Yeah.
turns out that the first 500 were all credits that were sold out of state. Do we get that benefit, or have we lost that benefit? And I actually don't
I
have
don't,
the
yeah, I
answer to
don't,
that.
I don't know the answer
Linda,
to
if
that.
you know, please, by all means.
What you're talking about is renewable energy credits with, it's like a utility scale, like attribution of electricity generated from renewable energy sources. The state has very much changed whether developers can in fact sell them, whether utilities can sell them. So I think that is a much smaller concern than it might have been 10 years ago. So I don't think you guys should spend time thinking about that. I raised my hand to make another point, and if I may go ahead and do that, it's that an approach that one could take in terms of trying to identify how Norwich might meet the goals that are, generally set for us by the state in terms of renewable energy generation. You could kind of look at individual parcels that seem to you very good, and you could try to identify, like, that's one route that's identified to say, hey, you can look for parcels. And I do want to mention one, there are a variety of constraints. So one is like there's a whole bunch of constraints. One of them is in terms of developing anything at the 500 kilowatt size or more is proximity to three-phase power in Norwich, which is extremely limited. But so there's one thing that I'd like to suggest, and I don't know whether the subcommittee would be interested in pursuing this, that if you can picture there's land that isn't really visible, but it's adjacent off of River Road behind what used to be the L.H. Cook barn, and it's now the LMM trucks are always going in and out of there. So it's a fairly large parcel. I don't really know what they're doing there, but it seems to me it has some potential for a megawatt size project if it were designated. Now, the other thing that I would just like to point out is that preferred citing as a particular local control issue is only for net meter projects, and those are only up to 500 kilowatts. So when you're talking about something larger, like we've just now begun talking about it, that's going to be that's not going to be net meter. It doesn't require a preferred site, but because the town gets to oversee land use policy, it is something that the town could say, hey, this is an ideal spot. Now, I don't know how anybody in any town would go about picking one particular parcel and saying, hey, we think this would be great for solar, without talking to the parcel owner and saying, hey, what do you think about us designating this? So that's a complication to be worked out, but I do want to say it's another option.
Wait, Linda, Jan, can I just, before I forget my point, when Linda and I were sort of talking about this, the town, like any other town, has state goals, and but you made a point about Ernie saying that Sharon had, the amount of land that's needed in order to achieve state goals. So that would go back to my question, which I think is actually quite relevant. In order to
I-
achieve,
Yeah, so I think your
Sure.
question, if I can restate it and see if I got it right, is so Norwich, and you can look on the town plan, I think it's like 63 megawatts or something like that. And so we would need, and we have 19% of that or something now. So that the number of projects that would be needed. You're saying if a 500 kW or multiple 150s go in different places in the town, those all count against our goals
I know,
as
I used the term credit, where I
designated.
think Linda misunderstood. I didn't mean to say if, but although
Yeah,
it
it's-
does make sense, the credit are, or the solar credits as a commodity
Yeah, so
and
I
solar
think the
credits
crux
as our
is though
state
that,
goal.
sorry, that to get the enhanced energy plan to pass, to be accepted by the regional commission, we would have to have a credible method, a credible story to achieve our goal. So our piece of the state goal. And that has a certain number of megawatts of renewable generation. So that's goal independent of credits, but it sounds like Linda's saying more recent state regs make it much less likely the credits are going out of state.
But if we had, if some, that's what my question was, if Stratford Solar Park credit, I mean, again, Stratford has probably reached their goal, as you were saying earlier, because they have a fairly large facility. But if in the last 5 years or 10 years when that was built, is it, maybe I'm not asking the question correctly. Is it the amount of solar generated, or is it how the credits are distributed? That, to me, how you reach their goals. So if that 1 megawatt facility that Sharon, not Sharon, but Stratford put in satisfied the entire town's goal, right? Because it's a facility, but the credits were sold out of state, does Stratford still benefit from meeting their goals?
Can
Does
I,
that make sense?
Chris, are you saying, basically you're asking is our Rex the
Correct.
metric that we can tell that, we can use to measure whether we're meeting what the state wants us to meet? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, my verbiage is wrong. You're right. You're right, Ernie. I should have said Rex.
I
If the
I
Rex
thought
were
it was
out of
the way it looks like on the plan or on the goal statement, it's renewable energy capacity within generation capacity within town. So
That
if
makes
you've
sense.
got
That
a
makes sense.
raise planted on your land of a certain number of megawatts, that's the goal. Before you say, where did those electrons go, or where did the money for those
Right.
electrons go?
That's what I wanted to make sure. And that was the one thing I didn't know. So if we had, again, looking at Stratford, if they're generating a certain amount of energy, but the Rex were sold out of state, it's still applied. That energy that's created is still being applied to Stratford's energy goals. That was my question.
Yeah, well, just think of it differently. Rather than the electricity created, just think of it as generation capacity.
Okay.
What do they have in town? If they decided they were just gonna flip the switch wherever it goes, how much electricity can they generate
Right. Okay.
from what's happening in their town? Because it could be windmills. It could be a big biomass digester that was turning it into something. It's renewable energy generation capacity. That's the way.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that there was a distinction between just the energy you've created from these renewables, or it matters where the Rex went. And that's what the distinction I was not clear on.
Hmm.
Yeah, and did I hear you correctly say that for the town to comply with the state's plan is we need 93 megawatts?
No, I think I'm
Generating
trying to
capacity.
remember. We were six something. Yeah, Linda, you probably have it on the top of your head, but it's
I'm looking at the current town plan, and so then that it was about that Norwich would need about 16 megawatts of installed solar to get the target of about 20,000 megawatt hours per year. Now, and that could have gone up. Uh, but anyway, and then the calculation at that time was that 16 megawatts of solar would take, each megawatt would take about 10 acres. So that means 160 acres total, and that's 0.5% of the total land area in Norwich. So again, it's a similar kind of, you know,
the little circles
all
with
of
the
the
circles.
land
Yeah.
area to get tinier and tinier. What we actually need is pretty small overall. The other thing in terms of policy, like it always has struck me that projects, say, of 150 kilowatts are way more suitable because they take maybe 2 or 3 acres, and that they are more easily sited in many towns. However, the from a broader perspective, for broader policy perspective about the cost of solar, small projects cost more. And so various agencies, including the PUC and all the utilities, they do not like small solar because it's the most costly solar. So from the utility perspective,
Hmm.
they are more interested in megawatt size, multi-megawatt size, whereas locals, I think, would be happier with, small cottage size solar. So we've got conflicting trends or goals.
Hey, do you mind if I talk to Linda for a second, ask her a couple of questions?
Go for it, Ernie.
Okay, well, Linda, in the 70s, I worked with a couple of companies that were pushing were developing solar power. And the vision at that time was to encourage every household to have its own solar, set enough capacity to generate what it needed so that everyone was self-sufficient. Obviously, this meant that the generating industry was going to take a hit if that vision came to fruition. And a lot of things happened with, for instance, one of those companies being bought by Mobil and then going out of business, stuff like that. So when I hear that, state agencies are opposed to, don't like small solar, I'm troubled. I'm very troubled because power companies are not, having worked, within them, they're not trustworthy. They're not good citizens, really. So I would not want to limit the ability of people to find ways to get away from having to deal with power companies. So I'm not quite sure how that squares with the people that you have just were talking about. And I'm not quite sure where they're coming up with their attitude, because, like I said, the original vision of solar was to decentralize, not to centralize. Decentralization, of course, is what causes lots of capitalistic problems, as I don't have to explain.
Well, on the policy end, it's like a tension between like what you're talking about, and I think, distributed solar like that, like scattered around on many residences, and particularly if they have batteries in their home, that is very resilient. That's good. The way that we have encouraged people to do that is by like paying them. The net meter approach is they get paid at retail rate for any solar kilowatt hours that they don't use right on site. When it gets sent into the grid, they get reimbursed just at the same cost as they would have paid for it. And that cost is higher than the cost of generating solar out of a 2 megawatt project. So there's good things about having distributed solar. that's resilience, basically. The bad thing is it's costly. And so then the utilities, that's why you see over the last year, since 15, 20 years since net metering's been around in Vermont, the PUC has consistently reduced the financial incentives for net metering. They're restricting it, and they're making it more expensive, and they're making it less attractive. So now when if you were a solar installer pitching to a homeowner and saying, hey, you ought to do solar, the period of time for you to recoup the investment that you make in is getting longer and longer over the past several years. And then a new change is about to come down the pike, and that is, so I've been talking all about on-site net metering, where the solar is really close to the user, the house, or it could be a business. But anyway, there's also in Vermont such a thing as off-site net metering or group net metering, and that's where there's somebody finds a very good site, they build like 150 or a 500 kilowatt array, and the user is not close and is not using the actual electrons, but it's an accounting exchange done with their utility bill, so that the generation gets credited to their bill. The electrons never flow to their use. So that is also called virtual net metering. And that in particular, the utilities hate, and that's about to be eliminated, eliminated through some legislation that is pushing the utilities to actually do more renewables. But this one area of renewable generation is going to be carved out and probably done away with. So the, I don't know, we can talk more about it, but I don't want to take your whole discussion off on a different track. But just to know that in general, the things that you prize, Ernie, they cost more. And so therefore, and it's not totally unreasonable, but the policymakers, like the PUC, part of their charge is to keep rates reasonable and affordable. So they keep highlighting that and saying like, oh, no, we can't do too much distributed solar. I do want to note one quick thing is that the bill that's about to pass that would eliminate off-site net metering, it does double the utilities requirement for what they call distributed renewable generation. So instead of 10% of their portfolio, it's going to be going up to 20. So that's in-state stuff. So they're not eliminating in-state and small-ish solar, but they are about to eliminate one particular version of that.
Okay, now this you see now I don't know if you're a lobbyist with the PUC or with the state house or anything like that. And I mean somebody is lobbying them. I don't know who they are any longer. But my concern is that, you know, it isn't actually distracting us from the purpose of this committee, because how we sort of arrange how we're going to get solar in the town and adequate solar in the town is going to be reflected on whether people actually can do net metering and have a solar system on their house, whether it's going to be worth it for them or not. I mean, if the state is going to cave as much as the utilities really would like, which is say no net metering at all, so there's no incentive other than people just want to be good people and use cleaner energy, that doesn't, than is available. That would kill the solar, the homeowners, the small solar industry. But I keep in mind that this is the exact same industry that the less electricity you use, the more they charge you for it. If you look at bills, like for instance, global Foundry is the biggest electricity user in the state. And their rate is about 1/10, if I remember correctly. And I haven't seen a bill. I haven't seen the paperwork for over 5 years, but it was about 1/10 of what a person who uses, let's say, a few kilowatt hours a year, I mean, a month, they pay 10 times as much per kilowatt. And yet the electrons don't change prices just because you use more. This is not a matter of bulk buying. It is called bulk buying. I mean, that is how they refer it, buying it in bulk. But the point is that there's no such thing as buying electricity in bulk. Every electron costs the exact same. Every turn of a generator, if it's a mechanical one, every turn, regardless of who gets those electrons, costs the same. So this is the industry that we're trying, that the PUC is appeasing. And so when I hear some of this stuff, I'm concerned, and that makes me concerned about how good and how effective our plans that this committee is supposed to be setting up are going to be.
Go ahead, Jan.
Well, I just want to, I mean, I hear what Ernie's saying. I guess my point, and I've said this in the planning commission meetings as well, at some point we have to take certain things as given from the outside environment, whether it's the regional commission or the state laws. And then if we want to fight about the current state laws, then we have a different venue to do it in than this one. And we may take that on as a separate task, but at some point we have to say, okay, we have assumed, for example, for this energy plan, we need to get approved as an enhanced energy plan. We need to accept the goal, our portion of the goal, and come up with a
Yes.
credible story of how we can, by 2030 and then 2050, meet that goal. And otherwise we won't get approved in the regulatory context we're in. We won't get that plan approved and it won't have any benefit. So there's that element of realism. I do see, I mean, Linda's point, I understand. The PUC and the overall picture is saying we have to think about ratepayers and cost of electricity. And if lots of small projects are more expensive to install than big ones, then there is a countervailing argument. And just one more point to Linda's point about the LH Cook property. And I think, no, obviously we would get in trouble if we pointed at one property and said, this one is perfect, let's go. But I think it's perfectly legitimate within the enhanced energy plan. You need a credible story. So what you really need is 4, 5, 10 times the necessary sites. You need to identify more than that, with the assumption that only a small fraction are ever going to come to fruition. So it is perfectly viable to say, here are specific sites, but many more than are needed. And also, if I'm not mistaken, at least that site is on the same glacial estuary. So it probably was a gravel pit, or some portion of it was a gravel pit, which then becomes a default preferred solar right off the bat as a former gravel pit, depending how long ago it was a gravel pit. But anyway, I think it would be helpful. So if we can take, if the committee agrees that we want to not have default solar in the plan we're proposing, not the whole town default, then we're looking at methods to define preferred solar in a way that comes up with enough land area to be realistic. And that's why the Sharon plan is in there. They had the 3-tiered system: preferred, constrained, prohibited. And several other towns have done that. And it seems to be a good balanced approach to giving a good story of how you're going to find the place.
Yeah, all right, Jan, I totally agree with everything you just said. And there is one question I'm going to backtrack to what Linda said, and it ties into my original question. And Linda brought up the whole idea that the PUC is going to start discouraging off-site. And here's a really interesting example. The town of Norwich benefits from our solar, from the town, the municipal side, but Bill built his solar park in St. Johnsbury. So oddly enough, and this does go back to the preferred, I am trying to make the connection between preferred site and not. If everybody in this town did not want solar and we bought everything off site, we would never reach our goal, right?
Right.
So that went back to my question. The town of Norwich is using solar, but we're not getting the benefit of saying the municipality is using solar, but we don't get the credit. And again, I'm not talking about solar credit. I'm talking about the credit, the state goal, the credit towards our state goal. So because the solar park is in St. Johnsbury, and that was the deal that the town cut with Bill. Now,
Yeah.
again, it was unfortunate that we were supposed to have an option to purchase those solar panels, which never came to fruition, but that would have also gone towards our state goals. So my question,
my understanding, and Linda, Chris, let me take that as just a very simple task, which is to confirm my understanding and get back to the group with the state. Is it true that the goal that we need to demonstrate in our enhanced energy plan is for installed renewable
Yes.
energy generation capacity on the land area that is Norwich?
that's my
That is
question.
my
That's my
understanding.
trying to get. That is exactly what I'm trying to get down to. If it's, if 50% of this town bought into solar parks, right? Because they didn't have the land area around their house, or they didn't want it for whatever reason. Are we, do we
Yeah,
not?
I don't
reach the
think that
state-
does it. I think you would have to say that Norwich, you had some freaky topography, or you just didn't have the land area, or 3/4 of the town was a lake, or, if you had a very credible story about why your town was special in terms of the area of the town, you couldn't fit these things. That would be a story. But saying that everybody's buying it from out of town, I don't think gives you the same credit.
Right, which is,
For that
it's a
goal.
shame that the town of Norwich, our own municipality, we didn't generate it. I mean, that would have been.
Yeah, you would
kind of
hope that we
another-
would just put some panels on the dump and
Yeah,
call
and-
that the town's generation. Yes.
Right, exactly. So that's why I'm trying to say land mass, and this goes back to the preferred site issue, is to identify, and another thing, Jan, going back to your point about the enhanced in the 3-tier and the enhanced energy plan, is that the PUC, I keep going back to Loveland, Upper Loveland, because it was the first introduction for me getting involved with a 248 review. It became very clear that the PUC wants town to actively become involved in these in the installations, or in the planning of this, and using the term mitigation, so that a planning commission and the select board can actually start talking to developers. What I sense in the town of Norwich is a developer can come in, we can't say anything, and yet the town of Sharon, I was reading their town plan, and they actually seem to have written it into their plan that they can have a conversation with the developer and actually come to an agreement and say, let's mitigate a little bit. Let's talk about some alternatives, like, build it, instead of building it in the middle of the field, build it around the field. And it seemed to me it was a collaboration. And that's where I don't see Norwich, the town of Norwich is, we don't have the ability to collaborate with solar developers. And that's what I think is the missing link. And I think that's what happens with the enhanced energy plan, is that we get that ability to actually start collaborating. And I don't mean collaborate from a financial, obviously, collaborate in the land use and discussions of land use. And I don't know if you agree or not, but go ahead, Ernie.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the converse of the situation we have with St. Johnsbury versus what we need to have in this one. If so, do I understand it correctly that if of the I think I'm going to call it 16 megawatts that we're supposed to have installed in the town, just for a number anyway. If someone comes into the town and says they want to put in, let's say, an 8 megawatt facility, but they're going to sell it all around the state or somehow distribute it elsewhere. It's none of that's going to be sold to Norwich residents. It's going to go to, Global Foundry, something. That was a joke. But it just won't be used here. Does that still count as, the installed capacity for the town?
That's what I was asking you from the beginning. That's what I was trying to identify with Norwich as being a perfect example that we are using solar for our municipal facilities, but St. Johnsbury is benefiting from the installation. That's I was trying to get at. Is it generation? Is it land? What is the definition? Bob, go ahead. You've had your hand up.
So I would think that the generating capacity is what is being judged ultimately, whether or not it's sold directly to Green Mountain Power, who can sell it wherever they want, or if it's contracted to somebody out of state. The ability to generate it within the state is the important goal. To provide some sort of resiliency against disasters here and there. Whether or not we're going to be set to take advantage of it, I don't know. But the thing that I'm hoping that is continuously at top of mind in discussing the enhanced energy plan and in changing the town plan to reflect interests is that we have to be very, very clear as to what is a restricted area, what is an off limits area. It has to be very well defined in general terms, and it has to be identified in the town so as to be able to determine that we have the capacity available to generate our share of the power. So if we only need 0.5% of the land area in the town as a whole, what percentage of south-facing slopes is that? And what percentage of south-facing slopes on a three-phase power line is that? We have to be able to find out all that stuff in order for it to be a really valid study and make those limitations on people. But the other thing that I worry about a little bit is that in practical use or application of these changes, the added expense for a developer, a small developer, or a developer of a small project of having to go through the extra steps that not having preferred site status incurs is, in many cases, that could be a complete disincentive proceed with a project. And so there is, by being further restrictive, there is a negative impact on what's going to happen with solar development. The balance that would be beneficial is to figure out what level of involvement is beneficial to meeting the goals of our state, of our town, of our society, in the process of trying to get rid of greenhouse gases. And there are some sacrifices that I think are not limiting. You know, there's going to be some sacrifices that have to be made, but we want to make sure they're not overwhelming.
Go ahead, Ernie.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Bob, because he's very, he identified some stuff that is really good. What I want to do is sort of flesh it out a little more specifically, if you don't mind. Because there in our one of the things we're charged with now that we weren't when I first got on the planning commission was that we have to now be concerned with the disruption or disturbance of forest blocks, which is it's part of a statute. We have to keep, you know, forest blocks of 500 acres of contiguous land that's forest. It doesn't have to be owned by the same person, but if it's got to be an area that of 500 acres or more, that's a forest block is considered 500 acres of forest, period. So we have to conserve some amount of, we have to conserve forestry of that sort. We also have to conserve farmland as well, which is, of course, since development started taking place in this country, has been the prime place to put things, man-made stuff. So, you know, and I'm you know, as a citizen, I'm interested in finding out how you would deal with these particular constraints, statutory constraints that we're going to have to deal with in this plan. You know, keeping in mind what you just said, you know, of all the different kinds of places, you know, keeping track of the south-facing slopes, three-phase power, and any other number of things that are necessary to be kept track of in order to make a site, either think it's to set up a site that it either is suitable for development of solar or not. So
Go ahead, Bob. Did you want to answer him?
The comment, yeah. So it seems as if several overlays and a lot of surveying has to happen in order to determine, you know, how many 500-acre blocks of forest or whatever you mentioned are available. What's the larger maximum area? Is there a large enough area of forest that it can be preserved, even when a smaller section of it is suitable for solar and could be developed? I mean, so a really comprehensive listing of first, before looking at the land at all, at our town's specifics at all, is got to be coming up with what are those specific requirements that have to be met at their heart, as opposed to, well, what passes for the you know, meeting the regulations and the vagueness of Vermont statute and so on. So if we find out really precisely what areas have to be blocked off, ridge lines, historic districts, riverfront, blocks of forest, watershed areas, etc. Is there enough left over of good solar siting that that it won't be impacted by overly restrictive regulations?
Can
Yeah,
I'm just gonna jump in. I'm sorry, Bob, you done?
Chris,
The only thing I'm,
Chris, or Linda's had her hand up for quite a while.
yeah, no, that's fine. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. I have 3 points that I want to make. One was in response to the question, the discussion a while ago about things being cited out of town and stuff. And I just wanted you to keep this in mind, that if a generation facility is sited in Norwich, that means it's going to be connected to Green Mountain Power, and that means that Norwich residents are going to benefit from it. And so I think you should just think of your goals for meeting that state target is on site in Norwich. That's what you're after. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Chris asked expressed the desire that there should be able to be collaboration between a potential developer and the town. And I do want you to know, I think there has been that kind of thing, and you're not aware of it because that collaboration has led developers to not pursue a project. So I'm aware of one example in that a willing landowner along Hobson was talking to a solar developer, but then got steered away from that by the planning office because that was a scenic area. It was designated scenic. So there has been collaboration, and typically collaboration will not result in a project. And then the other general principle, like while I introduce the question of like statewide policy that will affect solar development for sure, but that's just something I think that you all should just generally be aware of. But the town role is all centered around land use, not these other policies. And so your role with regard to land use is going to remain. And just know that that what happens is probably going to be even more influenced, though, by statewide utility related policies.
No, Linda, and can I ask you a question? Can we just go back to the Hobson Road one? So far, and goes right back to the default preferred site status. So the Hobson Road discussions, was it discouraged because it was scenic, or was it actually on a ridge line and therefore it didn't qualify? It was just discouraged.
And this is secondhand. I wasn't involved in the discussion, just heard about it afterwards. So my understanding is that that there was a landowner who was interested, talked to a solar developer. The developer had an initial conversation with the planning office and was discouraged from pursuing that site.
Okay, so the only
So it
reason I
may
go
not
back
have
to our,
been, yeah, it may not have been, clearly it wasn't Ridgeline if it was Hobson, but it was, if it was the planning office, and depending how long ago it was, Kyle's opinion or somebody's opinion, where they said, if that's scenic, you're gonna have a harder time getting it through or something, whether it was letter of the law default because it wasn't ridgeline or historic or aquifer protection, there's still enough clout on scenic that it would have been harder to do. That was probably the judgment.
right, but what I'm going back to is what our conversation has been about for the last 6 months. From the minute we started talking about Upper Loveland, is that the Queechy test is now sort of going back to what Bob said, is that, and again, Bob, I'm saying this not just because it was the way you said it, where you were just sort of generally saying, well, we don't want to go near the river corridors, or we don't want to go near this area. And what the Queechy test has, and the PUC is saying now, you can't just say river corridor. You actually now have to identify specific areas. So people are now having to say, we don't want to just protect the hills, the open hills in Norwich. We now have to identify specific areas that would make it much more restrictive to development, or mitigate it more actively. So if somebody says, again, we keep using J. Van Armen's because it just happens to be my favorite view in all of Norwich, but if we happen to use that as an example, then we can't just use the blanket statement, we got to save all open agricultural land. And there are towns who are actually saying, and I think Sharon brought it up in theirs, that the J. Van Armen property is not the best use for solar. It doesn't stop the Van Armens from pursuing it at all. It would just say that the town has put that down as one of the sites that is less desirable. And they're actually trying to encourage people to do exactly what Linda just said and actually pick out brown sites. Now, I don't know if they were talking about picking out people's land, but Jan, you were talking about not going and not approaching L&M, but they are actually asking towns to start picking and identifying what they think are good solar sites. Not that we have to approach the landowner, but saying, yeah, that's a great site. So they're asking, the PUC is actually encouraging us to do both.
Yeah, I wasn't saying don't be specific about the properties, because I think you're right, Chris, the more specific, the better. What I was saying is really you need to overpopulate your list. You need to, with the reality of what percent sites are going to make it through the whole thing, you have to be pretty specific about 10x the number of acres that you need to be credible that you're going to reach your goal. So I think you do want to be specific. You just can do almost a shotgun approach, say that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. We need 2 out of 6 of those to land. And I think because if you do the math, if you just do, and I did this math just quickly while we were looking at the Lamperti 150 kilowatt one, if 16 megawatts was our overall goal, and I think we have something north of 2 megawatts of already in the town from rooftop solar and others, and say we get more rooftop solar. But if you needed 6 or 8 megawatts more in the 150 kind of size, that's 150 into 1 megawatt, you need 6 or 8 of those. And so you're going to need 60 150 watt projects in Norwich to get in. It's that kind of a number. It's dozens of 150s, or it's 15 500 watt. And so we have to be aware that the siting process, to be credible, has to show how that's going to happen. How are you going to do dozens of 150s, or a dozen at least 500s in Norwich? And it just to kind of ballpark it for people.
So going back to what you just said, and it was really, this is actually a really important thing that I picked up in the Sharon enhanced, well, it was their town plan, not, quite frankly, I'm a little confused. When you have an enhanced energy plan, Jan, did you ask T-Rock if you get a separate document, or is your town plan just updated with different information?
Just your town plan meets the criteria required to be an enhanced energy plan, and it's the regional commission that does that formal approval. But it's essentially you tick all the boxes that make you qualify as enhanced. But
Okay.
it can be a separate document, it can be embedded, but it is the energy. It's not just the energy chapter, but it's because transportation matters and land use matters and so forth. But it's your town plan, the normal municipal town plan that is written in such a way to meet the standards of an enhanced energy plan.
Yeah, because if I remember, our conversation flowed to about a couple months ago, where we were deciding if the enhanced energy plan should be its own separate thing or a combination. So I can sort of sense that we're going to just sort of incorporate, as they've suggested, incorporate the changes into the town plan. But what I wanted to point out, to your point, is that Sharon had a paragraph on page, I don't know, 60. I meant to bring it up and have it on there, but I think it's a really important paragraph. They said, this is a work in progress. And we've been talking about the town plan as a living document. It is not a static document. It is a living document that needs to be amended and updated on a regular basis for different reasons, statutory compliance or whatever. But they wrote something to the effect that because I don't think they were, obviously they weren't like us with a default preferred site, but they said, we have not had time to classify our inventory in its entirety, that they're actually thinking that there may be more sites they want to add to their scenic resource list in their inventory, or add sites that they think are better for brownfields. But they allowed themselves to say, this is a living, breathing document. And right now, oh, shoot, I wish I had, darn it, I'm so sorry that I didn't print it out so I could read it. It basically was saying, this document is basically saying that we have the right to work with solar developers based on the notion that we have not completed our inventories at this point. Does that make sense? It was just really, it was very well written.
Yeah, and I think just to move us forward, I think what we need to do, if we could take a couple of steps, if we agreed that removing the default solar was our proposal. Okay. If we could agree with the kind of the 3-tiered outline approach as at least a starting point, in some, so it's basically excluded or prohibited, preferred, and those are typically the real preferred sites: brownfields, garages, rooftop, all this sort of thing. And then there's this middle group called constrained, where you are then specifying mitigation and so forth. But if we as a group could say, all right, we're going to move forward on the 3-tiered model, then I think we could do some homework and go read these various town plans that have already done this and have already been approved by the state, and start pulling, okay, here are the ways that these different towns define preferred. Here's the way that they defined constrained. And we'd be able to get started and really have something to work with. I mean, so that's kind of a proposal to the group.
I think it's a great idea. And at this point, we go back to the planning commission as a whole.
Do we need to? I don't know. I mean, what I just described, I think is perfectly good legwork for this group to do. It doesn't yet rise to the, I think we go back to the planning commission with, if we have a policy statement or decision that's big enough that we think they need to weigh in, or if we have some specific proposed language or at least outlines. So I guess that would be the question to the group. do we think the statement that we want to remove default solar, default preferred from the town as a given, is that a big enough policy statement that we need to go back to the whole PC for it? Or do we take that as a starting point? This group can decide it, and we'll wait to go back until we have more detail.
I'm actually not certain what else we need to do. And I mean, I guess my feeling is that it's a big enough topic. And I don't know how much we can keep going around on this. So to me, it's kind of like, I think we need to bring it back to the group and ask them. Or no, and bring it back and say, yeah, that's what we want to do. I'm not quite sure what else. If we make it.
I guess I would ask,
policy.
can we do the work? I mean, if the next planning commission meeting is March 12th or whatever, several weeks from now, I do think that this group could do some of the crafting legwork of going and looking at there are 4 or 5 different town plans that are just our neighbors that all have some version of this. And I think it would be time well spent to pull those together and look at them and kind of pull the pieces together into something that we could look at and get a start on our own version of. I think that would be helpful. The planning commission would love it if we could come back with a exceedingly rough draft as part of going back to them. And then we can get them to confirm the statement. I think that we will get confirmation based on the conversations we've had about Upper Loveland and all these others. I'm pretty sure that the whole PC would not debate too much the whole idea of okay, let's take default solar off, default preferred off, and replace it with the 3-tiered crafting of careful verbiage. I think the likelihood that will go through the whole committee is high enough that we can work on some wordsmithing and examples from other towns at the same time.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I take that back, what I said, because I was thinking that we were going to make that determination tonight, but we did tell them that the enhanced energy plan, which is it to me, there were 2 subject matters. The whole commission had already unanimously agreed that we should go forward with an enhanced energy plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the default preferred siting has also been brought up, and I think that everybody was in agreement. I don't think there was any disagreement. So I think you're right. We should probably do some, at minimum, put something together. So I guess how do you see that?
Didn't
Go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, didn't we see some good language? I mean, I thought the last time we discussed this, first of all, there's not a lot of changes that we need to make to our own town plan, but there was some really, there's some real, we just talked about earlier today, there was some really specific language that was specific recommendations, but other than that, we don't have a lot to do there. So we have some good guidelines to get something roughed in fairly quickly.
Or I agree, for everything other than the preferred siting statements, right? So Kyle said stuff about, okay, equity as it relates to low income weatherization, or he had very specific lines like that he said need to be in there. But if we take away default preferred, then we need to replace it with something, and that wasn't addressed in Kyle's memo because we had default in there instead.
Well, I mean, nothing's gonna, I mean, we can put the changed, getting rid of the default and put the default preferred and put in the 3 tiers pretty much in the same place. I mean, it's like I said, this is, it's like kind of typical legislative drafting. I mean, you look where there's a problem, you excise the problem and add the new language. And then show it to the rest of the committee and see what they think. And, Bob Papel, no doubt, has something to say because he's just really analytical and he's really good at that stuff. I'm just picking on him because I'm so I've seen him do it a couple of times and I'm just thrilled that he's on the commission. So I think that's going to be relatively straightforward. We certainly it seems to me that we could get this done in time before the next planning commission meeting. I thought that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I think from an OML point of view, we can't really say, okay, let's have 2 or 3 of us go off and bounce drafts back and forth. That doesn't work. But I think we could. It's really kind of which other town do we pick as our favorite, and then sort of take that and recraft it, because there are 3 or 4 choices easily that you could say, oh, I like that whole thing with just a few changes, or and then get the framework that you then obviously need to make specific to Norwich, all the details, but the framework, it's sort of like, okay, let's pick Sharon's, let's pick Stratford's, let's pick Thetford's. They're different versions of very similar outlines.
So just I wanted to go back to the Sharon one because I found out what page it was. Because again, it's a moving target for them, and I don't know when they worked on their enhanced energy plan part of it, but clearly, we've been talking to the Conservation Commission, and we were asking them their input. I still really think it's a responsibility for us to talk to some of the other organizations in town, like the Conservation Commission. And we were going to talk with Nancy Osgood that if there are specific areas, not just the downtown historic district, but does the conservation, Milt Fry, are we going to put in the town plan, the Milt Fry area will not have a solar park on it, that kind of thing. We going back to identify, but if to collaborate at that level, it could take us a year to try and actually go around and identify these spots. So this is why I was trying to say the Sharon, it says right here, well, it's a work in progress. The town of Sharon has not stipulated what properties are preferred sites for new commercial scale renewables. Proposed new projects will be considered on a case-by-case basis, which is, I think, a really interesting way. We don't look at it on a case-by-case basis because we're a default preferred siting. So there's no input, but they're saying we are going to look at it. As stated above, the town will favor locations that do not impinge on sensitive natural areas or scenic or historic sites. Any new vegetative screening negotiated as a part of the project must be maintained and watered for a period of blah, blah, blah. So they go into it. So they were even though they didn't necessarily have time to identify all their inventory, they're still allowing themselves to have a lot of say. So, I mean, I like their plan. Jan, you've read a couple other ones. Was there anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I like Sharon's is good, but I didn't have enough time to really go in depth on other ones. But can you tell me what page that was, just for the minutes?
It's on page 64, and the title of this particular paragraph is Energy Potential Maps and New Facilities. This is where they really get into, sites with raw wind power. They do have a page where and it's not in their energy chapter. They have it somewhere else embedded in the another section where they have an entire inventory list of no development. But for some reason,
Yeah.
they didn't incorporate it into their energy section. So that was a little odd, but whatever. It's still, it's still, you look at the town plan as a whole document as opposed to each chapter. But they do identify. The map illustrates areas where renewable energy sources are present, but does not identify where renewable energy generation must be sited. Sites with raw solar potential are generally flat, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's really, oh, and they also, by the way, which goes back to my original question, for new commercial PV, the town will favor projects whose RECs are owned in state and therefore contribute to Vermont's effort to boost its own clean energy production. When RECs are sold to out-of-state entities, it is non-Vermont utilities that claim credit for the renewable power, regardless. So basically, they are saying that they are going to, they say it somewhere where the town, for commercial scale, the town will favor projects whose RECs are owned in state. Now, I don't know if this is, because I don't think you can own RECs out of state anymore anyway, but it's,
But either
I really like
way,
it.
that doesn't apply to whether they meet their goal or not. I mean, they're saying that as a town policy, they would prefer thus and such. I think it's a separate criteria than whether or not it's towards their goal. But
Yeah, no, I was just saying that again, I just like that paragraph that said, listen, we haven't identified everything yet. This is a work in progress. And until we get all the inventory up, we're going to look at things on a case by case basis, which I think is a really good to sort of sort of, I don't know, it sort of covers our tracks to say that, yeah, we haven't put J. Van Armen's land on the protected lands list, but certainly we'll have more say in the discussions. Go ahead,
Mhm.
Linda.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to highlight that you guys are talking a lot about changing the language in the town plan now that relates to default. And I just want you to be sure that you recognize that the default part relates only to net metering projects, net meter projects that are between 15 and 500 kilowatts. And that, and I'm looking at, it's page 29 of the town plan. There are 4 other bullet points. So one is about individual or group net metered projects and about screening them, and projects larger than 150 kilowatt must meet existing standards for setback, et cetera, and it references zoning and subdivision regs. Projects larger than 500 kilowatts must have a management and decommissioning plans that will ensure the land will be returned, and whenever feasible, it must be combined with continued agricultural use of the land or habitat management. And then the last bullet point is projects larger than 500 kilowatts must not clear land within a map forest block, see figure 8, unless there is a management and decommissioning plan that will ensure the land will be reforested and managed, et cetera. So I just want you to be sure that you know that the default language in the town plan now is only for a particular size and type of solar project, and that you should ensure that your discussion covers that and all the array, all the possibilities, and be consistent too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point.
By the way, I'm just reading there. I thought this was really fascinating. This is going back to the Sharon town plan. There shall be no more than one generation facility of 250 to 500 kilowatt per mile within 200 feet of Route 132. Facilities of 500K generating capacities or less are preferred. In Sharon, village area. I mean, they go on, they really just go through prohibitive. This is your three-tier approach,
Yeah,
Jan,
yeah.
preferred locations, and then the prohibited FEMA floodways, which, I'm pretty sure the ANR was gonna flatten them in on that anyway, class 1 wetlands. Which is, I think, really interesting. All renewable energy development shall follow the protection strategies of Sharon's scenic ridge and hillsides as laid out in this plan. Now, what I don't know is, the Norwich, which we still haven't really, this is a big part of our problem, is that the ridgeline protection overlay is based on scenic roads. And we just went through that with Aaron. And Aaron is now, the whole thing was you can't see his property from New Boston Road. So the scenic ridgeline was a bone of contention for the Upper Loveland people because their road, even though they were going to be substantially affected by it, the site wasn't going to be visible from the road. And I really like to read theirs and say, is the scenic ridge and the hillsides, is theirs based on viewpoint from a road or not? Is it view, like if you have two owners that live on opposite ends, like if you're on Bradley Hill and you can look at Petrel, but you can't see it from Petrel Hill Road, are you affecting the homeowner or are you affecting everybody on the road? I'm not quite, that's just
Well, if you look, Chris, and it's a good, just to use Sharon's example, I've seen it in other towns, but if you look on page 62, which is the section protection of scenic ridge and hillsides, it's talking about what they would consider undue adverse visual impact. So like the period of time during which it would be viewed by persons traveling on public highways, that's not even particular public highways. That's just, would you catch a little glimpse of it for a second as you whiz by, or would you see it for the whole time you're driving? The frequent, how many people are on the road? So this has got a lot in it, that 1 through 10 on page 62, that gets to kind of helping judge scenic. So I think, I guess what I would, maybe let's propose, I'm trying to get around OML, but make progress. And I guess I was partway through patching together, or at least overlaying different towns' similar pieces, like 3-tiered. So I would be happy to continue to do that and generate the sort of superset of that as a just, it's not even going to be a draft, it's going to be like extra, but it'll say, we decided that, to Linda's point, for this part of this type of net metering project, we're proposing to remove the default and replace the default with a 3-tiered. Here is a compilation of several neighboring towns' 3-tiered approach, including scenic notes, and generate what will probably be a 6 or 8 page compilation of that section that we could put in the packet for the next select board meeting, and then decide, they could look at it and say, oh, okay, let's agree with that, or at least say, yeah, go ahead, committee, keep at it. So I would be willing to throw that together. It's not going to be clean. It's going to be a compilation, but I think that might be a useful next step.
I think that's a great idea, and I appreciate that you're willing to do that, Jan. I'm all for that. But if you want,
I'm sort of halfway or a third of the way through it already, so it would be not too bad to just pull it together, as long as it can stay rough and rough and kind of extra. It'll say it two different. Here's what Stratford did, and here's what Sharon did, and Thetford did a halfway in between. And then we can just look at that and say, oh, I think it'll be easiest if we can pick one that's 80% of what we like, and doctor it, rather than try and mush 3 of them together. That'll just be messier. But let's see what it looks like. if we get a few of them in front of us, at least the important pieces.
Would it be easier?
Right, and good.
Would it be easier if we looked at, if Chris and I looked at it as well as you looked at some of these other towns first and then? No, we can't do that without a meeting.
You can't chime in and say, hey, let's use Stratford. How about we use Stratford instead of Sharon?
Right.
As soon as
Right.
three of us start discussing that, we'd have to wait for the next meeting.
Right.
That's
So do you
that's
have any
why,
note-
to Jeff's point, I think Jeff's point was very good. If I'm just looking at what we have, if Linda and Rob were both members of this committee, we would have 5, and we could then say 2 of us could do what I'm proposing together rather than me, and we'd still be in OML territory. But we're not there yet. But that's why Jeff was saying 5-person minimum, 5-member minimum has advantages.
Fair enough.
But
Did
right
you-
now, we're
did
not
you-
there, so it's sort of all of us together or one of us is really what it comes down to.
Did you find out outside of our regional area, were there other towns that have incorporated the 3-tier that would be worth looking outside of, like, Stowe? I know Stowe's.
Yeah, there were
around
there were lots of them. I mean, that document, it's actually the one that you put in the packet probably 3 meetings ago, the one from Northwest Regional Commission that had that woman's PowerPoint and video actually on the link. That PowerPoint, the last 3 slides on the PowerPoint are links to every enhanced town plan in the state. And there are several dozen of them, and a number of them use this method. We just asked Kyle and
3-tier.
2 Rivers, and so Kyle and 2 Rivers gave us examples within their their area. But
Yeah.
I think there are others, and that's kind of the point. If we can get one to start with that's close enough, then we don't have to entertain 15 different ones to pick and choose, but we should look at 3 or 4 just to make sure we're not missing something.
All right, well, John, if you want to take that on, I bless your heart for doing it, but if you want Ernie and I to contribute in some way, let us know.
Well, I think I'll do the first essentially compilation, and then we put it in the packet for the planning commission meeting, because that's going to happen before the next solar siting subcommittee meeting. So that gets it into the public eye, it gets it in front of the planning commission, and that will be messy and a compilation. And then, we can say, all right, we're going to have a working meeting at the next subcommittee and we're going to slash through it together, or we're going to hand it, we're going to do that, and then we're going to hand it off to somebody else to take the next run at it. So I'll just take the first swing at it.
Well, I think I'm echoing what Chris said. Fall back on us if
Yeah.
you're running into problem, and we don't have to have a meeting. You can write each of us and ask us to do a specific thing. No discussions. Just
Yeah.
find this thing, write this thing, whatever it is you want. That way it'll,
Yeah, it might be, yeah, I could do homework that was, hey, here are 5 towns that look like they may do it this way. Can you look at their plans and tell me the page numbers of the parts that are of interest, or or don't use
Right.
this one.
just so that it's
Yeah.
not falling on one person.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, as long as it's like a one-way request, you're right. That's legitimate. Just say, hey, Ernie, can you read these? Take a look at these 3 and just tell us which one is preferred or something like that. Great.
Yeah, now, just out of curiosity, is in the meantime, while we're putting this together, is it not worth having, I'll talk to Nancy again, of trying to get the Conservation Commission and the Historical Society, as we had already reached out to them, and get them to commit to actually giving us some concrete areas that they are, what they would want in the town plan as areas that they
Yeah.
want to see protected.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. And if you could say it, if we say it in the three-tiered nomenclature, just for the, say, hey, what would you, this is the kind of structure we're talking about. What would you put on the prohibited list? And what would you propose on the constrained list, and any thoughts about constraint? Then they have a little framework to, and it's not, you're not just asking them for prohibited. There's more
Right.
openness. But yeah, I think
So
that's
the
a useful
Conservation
query.
Commission, we've already talked to them. The Historic Society, I think, who else would we talk to that we thought are reaching out to?
And well, the Energy Committee, depending on what the query is, but I think the Energy Committee obviously is part of the whole thing, or has done a fair bit of thinking about this. What do you, Linda, what do you think relative to how best to interact with the Energy Committee on this topic? Is that, I'm assuming that the people that show up to this meeting are not necessarily official Energy Committee members liaison with the subcommittee, but that's kind of what's happening. How should we go about that?
I had raised my hand to say yes. I think the Energy Committee is an obvious town group for you all to consult with. And I would suggest you just email our chair, Eric Rentz, and say you would like feedback and then like we have a committee meeting tomorrow. The Energy Committee meets once a month, the fourth Tuesday of the month. And so you can, I think for anybody that you reach out for feedback, to say what your question is, what are you looking for feedback on, and when you need it by is probably the two most important parameters. And what method, like do you, is it fine if the committee discusses it and one member attends and shares the group feedback, or do you want a written thing or what? I don't know,
Mhm.
That's a good question, Jan. It might be, I'm gonna put this isn't any more work, I'm hoping. But as you're writing this down, I like how you were saying, we need to propose sort of I mean, it's not a questionnaire, but it wouldn't probably be a bad idea for us to write out a one paragraph statement of what we're looking for and letting them fill it out on a piece of paper, right? Rather than just having these conversations and
Yeah,
give
we
them
can do both, but I'm just thinking, so the obvious next, it's not by tomorrow, it won't be ready by then, but Linda will have been at today's meeting. It'll be in the minutes, which, because we're meeting on a Monday rather than a Tuesday, is easier to get done by Thursday. So Thursday or Friday this week, I will have the minutes out that will say very specifically that we intend to ask these various town groups to give feedback to the specific three-tiered framework and to be a part of the conversation about what is prohibited and what is constrained. And so we can put at least the introduction to that activity in the minutes this week. Then we'll put something in the packet for the PC, which is essentially 2 weeks from now. So the packet will come out, before that. So we get a kind of a drumbeat that'll say, minutes, PC packet, PC discussion, PC minutes, and then solar sighting packet, and so on. So I think we can sort of have something coming out once a week here for the next few weeks that it's sort of doing what we talked about to kick off this activity and get more public visibility to it. But it's got a little specificity to it that says we're opening up a conversation around citing criteria in this three-tiered framework for these type of net metering projects. And we're asking town groups to give input.
Yeah.
I'll try to
think
make
that-
that as clear as possible in the minutes, and Linda, obviously, if you can at least do some kind of a little announcement at the Energy Committee meeting tomorrow, just to use that opportunity, and then they'll see the minutes that come out later in the week.
Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. And I want to note Rob is a member of the Energy Committee as well. It occurs to me that for all the groups from which you seek feedback, that it might be useful in case they have like particular ideas before they see any draft from you. It may be useful to contact them 2 times. One is to say, do you have any concerns, like just right off the top, but then and sometimes so you can get better feedback when you have something to which your commenters can react. So I would suggest at least 2 contacts. So one is like, give us topics that are of concern to you. And then the other is give us your feedback on this version of what we're thinking about doing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
Yeah,
That
that's-
having something in paper is actually going to be really helpful.
Yeah, so I think we can, if we open it up and say in the general terms, this is what we're doing and this is the kind of feedback we want. And then when we have a rough document, it's always easier to comment on something specific. Yeah.
Well, and not only that, Jan, but I think what would be really good is that I know it's too late to add it to the Energy Committee's packet this time, but whatever document that we come up with, those groups can add it to their packet, which I think is
Yeah.
a really helpful thing. So do you want to do that when you're doing this?
Well, I think let's do it sort of one step at a time. I'm not planning to make something pretty enough that we want to immediately put it out, Yes, you get better feedback with an actual document, but if it's too messy, then it causes more confusion than not. So let's take I'll do the minutes as usefully as I can for tonight's meeting to open up the topic. And then let's get the planning commission meeting on the 12th to be kind of that packet and that discussion to be the next, then we'll go from there. And I don't want to try to do too much in the next 2 or 3 weeks and we'll just end up confusing things.
No, that's fine. In the meantime, I'll let Nancy know that and she's the historic preservation, right? She's not.
She's historic and conservation is
Right.
Oh yeah, no, I
forgot his name.
I have his contact
I know.
information.
I know. I forgot. Oh shoot, what is it? Well, anyway, there are, I think, several groups that we've already reached out to.
Is Craig Lane.
Craig Lane. That's right. Right. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll just at least let them know that.
If we park it there, do you want to do approval of the minutes?
Oh, I didn't even look. She has. Did she add?
Yeah,
Miranda couldn't include them, so I don't know. I didn't.
What? No, they're in
Go all the way
they're in you gotta go all the way down to page 100 and something or other. But if
Okay.
you go,
It was
it's
only supposed to be
after the
last meeting.
letters. Yeah, it's actually on the packet, it's page 201 out of 202. It's 2 pages of minutes for the January 16th meeting.
That's right. That's the Sharon Town plan. Well, then at this point, I say, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of what was the date? I don't have it up.
January 16th, 2024. So
Okay.
so move.
Second.
All right.
right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Aye.
Fabulous.
Okay. Good.
Okay, so we're good. So Jan, you've got more homework.
Yeah, well, like I said, I was in the middle of it. I tried to get more of it done for tonight than I got to, but I have them all laid out and kind of organized. I just haven't compiled the matching pieces together. So it'll be fine. I want to finish it anyway. So I will.
All right,
My
well,
goal is to get something. I'll frame it in the minutes for this week, and then I'll get something in the packet for the PC. That'll come in under the agenda item, solar siting subcommittee report, and that'll
right.
hook it in. All
Well,
right,
thank you for doing that. Really appreciate your
sure.
spending that kind of time.
Yeah,
If you
so
do
if
it,
you
like I
wanna-
said, Ernie and I, if you need us, you know.
I will
Sure.
definitely, I'll say, I'll probably say, hey, here are two or three that look interesting, take a look at them. And so Chris, you're gonna tell Craig Lane and Nancy just to give them a heads up.
And just purely a heads up. That's it.
Just I mean, even if it's just make sure you look at the minutes from the last meeting. We're moving forward on something we'll definitely want your input on.
Right. I think they've been waiting for us to sort of see what direction we were going in, and they knew it was a work in progress. So
Yeah.
I've had a conversation with both of them, so
Okay.
it will not be unexpected.
Okay.
All right, so
I
are we ready
would,
to adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
I'm all with it. All
Aye.
right. Great.
All right, thanks. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Chris.
See you later.
See you, Rob, Linda.
Good night.